Hi, I'm Amy McGraw with the Garden Astronomer, telling true stories of incredible astronomical events that you may not have heard of but will never forget. Today, we dive into the story of a young Kansas farm boy grinding glass in a dirt root cellar by day and chasing starlight with a telescope built from old farm parts by night. It's a journey of patience and pure tenacity that ends with a single moving speck on a glass plate and an icy world waiting in the dark 3 billion miles away. This is the story of Clyde Tombaugh and the discovery of Pluto. Thanks for listening in. It's late afternoon in western Kansas, 1926. 20-year-old Clyde Tombaugh is grinding a glass disc behind his farmhouse. Using abrasive grit and slurry, the young farmer is shaping the glass into a shallow curve that will gather starlight and bring it into focus. Clyde Tombaugh's passion for the sky hadn't started then. It began years earlier when his Uncle Lee loaned him a small telescope and a worn-out book on astronomy. Clyde spent hours peering through the modest eyepiece, memorizing the pages of the book, until simply looking wasn't enough. He wanted to build an instrument powerful enough to see the details for himself. Clyde's work on the mirror stretches from the winter days into the spring. He tests, refines, and tests again. When he finally judges it done, he ships it to Napoleon Corot, a telescope maker and optician based in Wichita, Kansas. Corot specializes in silvering optical mirrors, and Clyde waits for the verdict. Has he actually made a mirror that'll work in a telescope? When Corot's letter finally arrives, the news is not good. The mirror has a poor figure and won't work well. But here's the strange part. It isn't the glass that failed Clyde. It's his warm Kansas house. Those warm air currents distort the precise measurement he needs to test the mirror's figure. The fix comes that same fall when the Tombaughs do something every farm needs sooner or later. They dig a root cellar into the earth. It's cool enough for storage and sturdy enough to outlast a tornado. Clyde talks his father into making it a larger pit so he can work down in the Earth's cooler air where the temperature holds steady. And it works. In his new underground world, he makes his first successful mirror for his Uncle Lee in the spring of 1927. The money his uncle sends for that job buys the glass for his next ambition, a 9-inch mirror. For the mount, Clyde scavenges pieces off the farm. To carry the telescope tube, he builds a mount using a heavy cast iron base of an old cream separator, a crankshaft pulled from his father's retired 19 Buick, and a spring from a lawnmower seat. Through that fall and winter, he works the glass again. And now, by late winter of 1928, after weeks of work, he finally achieves the best parabolic curve he's ever made. He ships the finished glass off to Corot. When the silvered mirror arrives in the mail, Clyde finishes his telescope. And with it, he's able to observe the craters of the moon and test the glass on distant star fields. But his days still belong to the farm. And no one, least of all Clyde, has any idea yet what this instrument is about to mean for him. By the early summer of 1928, the farm has never looked better. Acres of oats stand shoulder high behind the house, planted almost as an afterthought. The wheat around it runs tall and green, and on June 20th, the late morning settles into that thick, windless heat that hangs over Kansas this time of year. But then, out of the northwest, the cloud tops rise fast. The base turns gray, then a deep blue-green. That color means ice is riding somewhere inside, joined by thunder rolling off the plains. Across the yard, the wind picks up speed. Muron, his father, shouts for the horses. Clyde is right behind him. The whole family drops into a drill they've run a dozen times before. Horses in, cows pinned, doors latched. The first hailstone hits the roof, then another, and another. The knocking becomes a clattering wall as the hail bounces off the porch boards and buries itself in the yard. Then, as fast as it came, the thunderstorm moves on. Clyde surveys the ruined fields after his father turns back toward the house. Any hope of paying for college is beaten flat into the mud. And then the thought, building over time, settles in. Farming's not for me. The first chance I have of getting out of it, I'm going. Summer passes into autumn that year of 1928, and Clyde's days are spent running a neighbor's combine to earn back a fraction of what the storm destroyed. But by night, he turns his 9-inch reflector upward. He spends hours at the eyepiece sketching the detailed storm bands of Jupiter and the crawling maria of Mars. The seasons turn again, and now the wheat stubble gives way to frost. He's still out there in the freezing cold under the clear sky of the plains. By December, he has a stack of these drawings. Enough, he decides, to send somewhere that might offer expert advice on his work. He slides them into an envelope addressed to the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. He isn't asking for a job. He has no university degree to lean on. The letter drops into the mailbag, and the waiting begins. Just days later, a letter arrives from Wichita. It happens to be from Napoleon Corot, the optician who silvered his mirrors. Corot has not forgotten the young farmer. Business is good, he writes, and he asks Clyde if he'd be interested in taking a job at his shop. It would mean a steady paycheck and a ticket off the farm. Before Clyde can consider the deal, another envelope arrives. This one postmarked Flagstaff. It is from Dr. V.M. Slifer, the director of the Lowell Observatory. Slifer doesn't offer critiques on the sketches. Instead, his letter includes a volley of pointed questions. What is your schooling? What are your instruments? And strangely, are you in good physical health? Clyde writes back, answering every question. Then another letter from Slifer arrives. The observatory, Slifer explains, is preparing a new photographic telescope. The work will demand long hours in an unheated dome through the dead of winter. He asks if Clyde would be willing to travel to Arizona to operate it on a 90-day trial basis. There, in his hands, Clyde holds 2 tickets out of the farm fields. He can go east to Wichita and spend his life building instruments for others. Or he can go west to Flagstaff and look through a professional telescope himself. It's no choice at all. What amateur astronomer could resist the pull of a professional observatory? He packs his suitcase and buys a one-way fare to Flagstaff. He has just enough cash to get him there sight unseen. And the reality hits him. He has no money for a return trip if he fails. On January 14th, 1929, his father drives him 30 miles to the depot in Larned, Kansas. The parting words are a little gruff, but loving. Clyde, make yourself useful, and beware of easy women. Clyde boards the train, and with a heavy jolt, it inches from the station. He's now on his way toward the setting sun and the icy domes of Mars Hill at Lowell Observatory. The train pulls into Flagstaff a little after 1 o'clock. Clyde steps down onto the platform as the conductor hands him his baggage. Quite a trunk you have there, he says. What do you have in it? Books, Clyde says. Inside the depot, a gray-haired man steps forward before Clyde even has to ask, Are you Mr. Tombaugh? Yes. Glad to see you arrived safely. I'm Dr. Slifer. Outside, snow hits heavy on the road. Slifer's car takes the grade in low gear on the climb up Mars Hill. Partway up a steep pitch, the wheels give up entirely. The car slides backward. Slifer doesn't say a word. He just backs down to level ground and points the hood up the hill again, taking it with more speed. The second run takes. At the top, the administration building sits against the pines. Slifer leads him past a woman at a typewriter. It's Mrs. Fox, the secretary, and up a narrow staircase to a small room. This is yours. You may want to rest a little. Clyde sits down in the single chair, feeling the thin mountain air at 7,000 feet. Near 5 that evening, he rides down the mountain with Mrs. Fox to find dinner in town. He's taking in a new life, a world away from everything he's known. After dinner, he starts back up on foot, alone this time. The road climbing away from the last lit windows of Flagstaff. The ponderosa pines close in on both sides, snow banked white beneath them. Above the tree line, the sky is pitch black, and the stars seem closer than ever before. You know, this makes me stop for a moment and wonder. I think about Clyde walking up that hill. I've driven up that hill myself on a family visit to Lowell several years ago. It's a windy trek, and I can only imagine how it must have felt to him that first night walking in the freezing dark, wondering how in the world he'd gotten to this unfamiliar place in that cold, freezing dark. The next morning, Dr. Slifer sends Clyde out to the new 13-inch photographic telescope. The dome stands open. The tube is hollow and waiting for a lens still traveling by rail from the east. Inside, machinist Stanley Sykes and his son Guy work on the equatorial mount, drilling hand control fittings into the heavy steel polar axis. Finishing the job falls to Clyde. He also settles into the rest of the work. On afternoons, he leads public tours up the path to the great 24-inch refractor. At night, he returns to the basement to feed the furnace with heavy pine logs, keeping the buildings warm until morning. Between chores, he learns the darkroom. This includes how to expose and develop the glass plates, and when the lens finally arrives, he helps align and focus it. Handling farm machinery has prepared him well. On April 6, 1929, the real search begins. Clyde steps into the unheated dome of the 13-inch astrograph and inherits an unfinished obsession. Decades earlier, Percival Lowell had become convinced that the small irregularities in the paths of Uranus and Neptune pointed to a ninth planet still out there. Lowell spent his fortune and his final years chasing the idea, and died in 1916 with the mystery unsolved. 13 years later, the task rests on Clyde's shoulders. The work is long and solitary. Night after night, he climbs a wooden stepladder into sub-zero air. He peers through a guiding eyepiece for an hour at a stretch, making tiny corrections to keep a star locked on the crosshairs while the telescope gathers faint light onto a 14 by 17-inch glass plate. By the end of June, he has exposed more than 100 plates mapping the sky. Late that same June, an astronomer from an eastern observatory pays Mars Hill a visit. Dr. Slifer and Clyde walk him out to the dome to show off the new telescope and explain the search for Planet X. As they return to the administration building, the hallway telephone rings for the director. While Slifer steps into his office to answer it, the astronomer leans over to Clyde and says softly, "Young man, I'm afraid you're wasting your time. If there were any more planets to be found, they would have been found long before this." Clyde stands his ground, even as doubt hangs heavy in the air. By January 1930, Clyde returns to his search in the constellation Gemini. On the night of January 21st, a howling gale roars up Mars Hill 10 minutes into an exposure. The guide star Delta Geminorum swells into a blurred ball larger than Jupiter. Clyde fights the cold as he finishes his exposures. What he doesn't know is this exposed plate will soon play a critical role in his discovery. Weeks later, the search moves indoors into a cramped basement room and the Blink Comparator. It's a massive cast iron machine originally brought to Mars Hill years earlier at the urging of a senior astronomer, Dr. Carl Lampland. While Lampland and Slifer pursue their own research programs, Clyde spends hours at the eyepiece alone, sifting through millions of stars. Through a single eyepiece, a shutter clicks back and forth several times a second. Stars stay fixed. But anything that's moved, asteroid, comet, or planet, jumps. Each plate holds hundreds of thousands of stars packed like grains of sand. Clyde studies them a square inch at a time. What makes the work even tougher is discarding the false alarms, flaws, dust, and swarms of ordinary asteroids that leap across his field of view. It's roughly 4 o'clock on the afternoon of Tuesday, February 18th, 1930. He holds the Blink Comparator with a plate he exposed on January 23rd and another from January 29th. He scans the pair taken 6 nights apart, centered on the star Delta Geminorum in Gemini. In the corner of his eye, something flutters. He stops. He flips the shutter by hand. A dot of light, 15th magnitude, barely there, shifts about 3.5 millimeters. Asteroids move much faster across the plates. This one has shifted only a fraction of an inch in nearly a week. Clyde calculates the motion. It is so slow and so faint, it must be sitting billions of miles out on the frozen edge of the solar system. He pulls a third plate. Taken that windy night of January 21st, he mounts it. The same tiny dot is there. He sits back in the dim room alone. For 45 minutes, no one else on Earth knows what he knows. Across the hallway, Dr. Carl Lampland sits at his desk, listening to the familiar clatter of the machine. But when the clicking suddenly stops, followed by a long silence, Lampland suspects something unusual is happening. Moments later, Clyde appears at his office door asking him to come look. Lampland peers in, adjusts the focus, and watches the dot jump, too. Clyde continues down the hall. Dr. Slifer is at his desk, buried in paperwork. Clyde announces, "Dr. Slifer, I've found your Planet X." Slifer bolts upright. Without a word, he strides down the corridor so fast Clyde has to jog to keep pace. The director presses his eye to the instrument, flips the plate, sees the leap, and turns. "Don't tell anyone until we follow it for a few weeks. This could be very hot news." And then he asks Clyde to rephotograph the region. It's around 6 o'clock in the evening by now, and the sky is cloudy. Clyde drives down to town for the mail and dinner, checks the sky again, finds more clouds, and does the only thing a sensible man who's just found a planet can do. He goes to the movies. He watches Gary Cooper in the 1929 film The Virginian. Later, he'll write that as he waited and watched, his knees kept shaking during the gun duel at the end of the film. For the next month, Mars Hill works in secrecy. Night after night, the astronomers train the observatory's telescopes on the object. Dr. Lampland tracks it using the 42-inch reflector, watching it crawl across the stars. Then, on March 13th, 1930, the big announcement goes out to the world. It's time to coincide with the 75th anniversary of Percival Lowell's birth, and the anniversary of William Herschel's discovery of Uranus. Back in western Kansas, a newspaper editor telephones the farmhouse in Burdett. Clyde's father answers. "Did you know your son discovered a planet? It's in the news everywhere." No, but I know he was on the trail of one," Muron replies. Muron rushes outside to tell his wife. "Who is that on the phone?" she asks. "It's about Clyde." "Is something wrong about Clyde?" "No. Leslie Willis said that the wires were reporting Clyde had discovered a planet. We must send a telegram and congratulate him." Just think of the conversation out at that farmhouse on that day. Once the announcement reached the world, the next question was obvious. What do you call a newly found planet? Over 1,000 suggestions flooded the Lowell Observatory. Percival Lowell's widow, Constance, proposed first Zeus, then lobbied to name it Percival, and finally suggested her own name, Constance. But the winning idea came from across the Atlantic in Oxford, England. 11-year-old Venetia Burney, fascinated by classical mythology, suggested Pluto, the Roman god of the underworld, perfectly suited for a dark, frigid realm sitting at the edge of the sun's light. Her grandfather cabled the idea to the astronomers, and the staff at Mars Hill fell in love with it. Beyond the mythological fit, the first two letters, P and L, served as a permanent monogram honoring Percival Lowell himself. This discovery changed everything. The farm boy who lost his college money to a summer hailstorm received a full scholarship to the University of Kansas and earned the degrees in astronomy he once thought were closed to him. He spent the next decade hunting the sky, discovering numerous asteroids, variable stars, star clusters, and galaxies. He went on to track early ballistic rockets at White Sands, taught generations of students at New Mexico State University, and left a legacy as one of the most tenacious observers this world has ever known. Clyde Tombaugh died in 1997 at the age of 90. His journey did not end there. Years after his passing, astronomers would reclassify Pluto as a dwarf planet, but rather than diminishing his work, it revealed something far grander. Clyde hadn't just found a lonely oddity on the fringe. Pluto was the first glimpse we had of a vast population of icy worlds that astronomers would eventually recognize as the Kuiper Belt. In 2006, NASA launched the New Horizons spacecraft on a 3 billion-mile voyage to photograph the icy world he had found through the eyepiece 76 years earlier. Inside the probe rode a small aluminum capsule holding an ounce of his ashes. Those ashes have now crossed the orbit of Pluto and continue outward towards interstellar space, carrying that boy from Burdett, Kansas, out into the stars he spent a lifetime chasing. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want to spend more nights under the stars uncovering the forgotten human stories in astronomy, please hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Amy McGraw with The Garden Astronomer. Until next time, keep your feet on the grass, your mind in the stars, and don't forget to look up.